have the real pleasure this morning of introducing a dear, dear friend of ours. And raise your hand if you know the Reverend Connie Clark. And that's a lot of you, but that's not all of you. And so if you don't know our dear friend Connie, she was the vicar of Buck Mountain Episcopal Church right down the road for 17 years. But I would say, having had really fantastic conversations with Connie all week long, that this is a person who is a lifelong minister. So retirement means something, certainly, but it doesn't really mean a cessation of this person really functioning in their gifts in another way. And I know in this area, you are such a presence. Now, I want to also say that Connie and Lance were dear, dear friends. And if I can butcher a figure of speech, as a man and woman of the cloth, you were kind of cut from the same cloth in so many meaningful ways. And getting to talk with you this week, it just resounded more and more for me. There are echoes of Lance's heart whenever we speak, and I really treasure that, being able to call you a friend. So I wonder if you would not only welcome, but open your hearts to a message from our dear friend, the Reverend Connie Clark. Connie, will you come?
Church that was built in 1747 and hasn't had a lot of updates in the meantime. And most of us are older and don't know much about technology. You don't have all this, right? So you just shout, which isn't a problem, but I'll spare you. My heart is full to be with you. I've been honored to be a part of your church by extension through opportunities over the years. We've, as communities together, I'm doing something wrong, huh? No? No? I think I'll go there. I think so, yeah. Move that out of your way. Oh, thanks, honey. I appreciate it. Thank you. One reason that I like to have the microphone, it reminds me of an occasion we had together as churches, not just Chestnut Grove and Buck Mountain, but also Ravenna Church and Pleasant Grove and a couple of others, Mount Sinai, I think, up here, and maybe even Nortonsville Church of God at that time. We all gathered on the Earlysville Green once a couple of summer Sundays, more than that, in fact. I remember Britt and I was talking about how many sodas we needed to provide. Anyway, there were a lot of people there. And Lance, being Lance, said, "You're preaching." And I said, "Oh." And the thing is, most of those churches, not Pleasant Grove, they've had Shirley Chapman for a very long time. They're not used to women preachers, right? And Lance is like, "Oh yeah, you're gonna, yeah." I'm like, okay. So the reason, this is very exciting to have this in front of me, because that day I had that microphone and I was walking around and I got crazy. And I wound up telling everybody, I used to be a chaplain in state psychiatric hospitals for 10 years. And I wound up telling everybody about a lady, maybe this is a good start to this talk, a lady who was a patient and she was an African-American pastor's wife. And so she was called the First Lady of her church. And she was quite ill by the time I got to know her. But her connection with God was so amazing, so amazing. And she would come up to me and say, this is where Lance just went crazy. He got real inspired. What she said to me was, put your hand on my bosom and pray for me. And as that was said to me, I was like, I'm not putting my hand anywhere near your bosom, lady. Talk about losing your job. And she would take my hand and go, and I'd be like, anyway, she thought of me as a spiritual filling station, which I think is a wonderful thing. Would it were so for all of us when we had that opportunity. But Lance decided after I finished that he would say to the whole crowd of hundreds of people, now, brothers and sisters, I want you to put your hand on the bosom of the person standing next to you and pray. I thought, yeah, we're going to pray. Anyway, that was an amazing time. And I don't know any other minister, any denomination, non-minister, any denomination, who would have done that and who would have given me that opportunity. So we were very good friends, and he called me the Baptist Anglican. I called him the Anglican Baptist. Very, very of one mind about many things. So also, I am grateful to this church for many things, but I particularly want to mention the food pantry at Buck Mountain, which was started in my second year there, in 2009, and was insane. It was insane to do that, okay? We did not have the money. We did not know what we were doing. We only knew we had called around to a bunch of different social service agencies and said, what is the need right here? Well, there's no food pantry unless you go downtown or to Rio Road, which for our neighbors who live up in the hills and hollers is a really long trip. So they said there's no supplemental food. At that time, the green effort had not started. So we said, well, heck, we can do that. And you know who came along to support that? Chestnut Grove. And every month for many years, you all helped us financially. And I am incredibly grateful for that. And I wish we could all churches could do this thing of being together and really finding the heart of the faith. We don't have to argue about women, whatever it is, if we focus on what we're really called to do and do the work and have the joy together. So some Chestnut Grove folks are volunteering at Buck Mountain at the food pantry, and that also is a great gift. So, but hey, I don't belong there anymore, so I have to stop talking about it. That's hard. Anyway, thank you very much. I am going to talk about Jacob a little bit. And you might wonder now, how did she pick that? I wouldn't have picked it. We have a thing, and I think Lance followed the lectionary, at least some, where we have a calendar of readings appointed as a 3-year cycle. And I left with the freedom that I was given for this assignment, pretty much whatever you want to do. It's very dangerous. But anyway, I looked at the lectionary sections for today, and one was the Jacob wrestling with God. So I started reading, thinking, well, remind yourself about Jacob. And he's not a very good man in lots of ways. And he starts out early being kind of a jerk, right? Anybody remember some of the stuff he did? Not just me. He tricked his twin into giving away his birthright, which was the twin Esau's right to have. With the help of his mother, he tricked his twin to get that very special blessing from their father, when in fact it was due to the brother. And he went on through life being clearly a passionate lover of God, but a very flawed one. Now, would you know anything about that? Because I do, right? I love God, and I do a lot of dumb stuff. I don't mean to. I haven't tricked anybody about their birthright, but I see that I could. I see that I could. We wind up with Jacob out in the middle of nowhere, in the wilderness, where you could meet God, right? It's a good place to meet God. Or you could meet your death. We lose context as modern people living in a suburban world here. We forget that really the wilderness, especially then and there, was very dangerous, right? It was not a benign, lovely place to go on your vacation. People went there purposefully, but it was still quite, you go there and you're like, ugh. Right? Remember Jesus being in the wilderness, being tempted by Satan. Not an easy time. Well, old Jacob is in the wilderness, and he's scared, as Britt said. He's scared with oncoming confrontation with Esau, his twin brother, whom he had robbed, whom he hasn't seen in forever. And here comes Esau coming with his folks toward him, toward Jacob. And Jacob doesn't know what is going to happen. Is Esau going to bring an army and kill him? You know, humans, we stole the birthright. You could say, well, he deserves it. So, good old Jacob, in this time of fear, and in this time, I'm sure of going, God, I really shouldn't have done that. Well, I hope he thought that, even if only to protect himself from the wrath of his brother. He is finally fully fixated on God, because God comes to him, as God has done before in the wilderness with that bunch of angels going up and down a ladder. God is ready to wrestle. I love this. What a crazy situation. God shows up now, at first, no doubt, thought to be an angel, but it's God. And they wrestle all night. That sounds so exhausting, terrifying, thrilling, and neither one will give each other up, right? They are locked in this struggle. And I like thinking about what came out of that. I wanted to talk about healing today, but I can't quite get there. However, we can talk about transformation. Jacob went on to be, after that encounter, he did have the limp. He got the blessing he wanted from God in that wrestling match. He got the blessing, he was always asking for a blessing from early childhood. Maybe even in the womb, where his mother felt the two twins wrestling. And, God told her, yeah, that's how they're going to be. That's how they're going to be, and they were. So the wrestling match ends with God blessing Jacob, which he asked for, but also touching him, hip, thigh, somewhere around there, and giving him a permanent limp. Maybe so everybody would know him when they saw him coming and say, uh-oh, here he is. Here he is again. This guy that we know is somehow connected to God really deeply, but can kind of be a jerk or more. Was he transformed? If so, we don't really get to see that right away. What we get to see is him going forward. He keeps going in his earthly pilgrimage. He keeps hanging on to God, even when I'm sure he knows he's not doing the greatest things. He's running away because he's afraid. He's kind of a mess still, but he has the blessing of God. And he has this limp to remind him. I have a limp to remind me of wrestling with God. It's not so much a physical limp, it's more inner limp, but it's a good limp. Jacob needed to learn that God, in fact, was more powerful than him, and also that God was benevolent to him, and that God was not going to strike him down for being the kind of difficult and disobedient person that he was many times. God was going to bless him, and here's the sign of blessing. You wrestle with me your whole life, essentially, and you're still mine, and I'm still yours. And let's remember that you are imperfect all the time. Strong, sturdy man with a limp now, forever, to remind him of that encounter. Encountering God is always going to change us, is it not? Even if it's today in this beautiful space with all these beautiful things going on, and it's like, well, I know God's here, but I'm not having a wrestling match. I'm not in my deep place of like, come on, God, or God going, come on, Connie. Probably happens a lot more than the other. But there have been times, maybe for you too, when I believed, but something had to change. Something had to go deeper. I needed to go deeper, and something needed to get out of the way in me. I went to Israel on a pilgrimage with a group of people who wanted to go and visit the ancient monasteries as well as Jerusalem quite a few years ago. So I went out into the desert with this group of people. I didn't know what I was doing. They didn't either, it turns out. We got off the plane one day. The next day we headed into the desert for a nice little hike uphill to an ancient monastery in a cliff. It was 120 degrees that day. Now, it was very important to me. I was much younger, okay? Give you an excuse. I was much younger. And I wanted them to think I was so spiritual and cool. It was so important to me that these leaders, pastors and so forth, would look at me and see something of a spiritual leader in me, which I was not at the time, but longed for. So you know what happened? I had heat stroke. And I nearly died. And they got me back to our bus, and there were 2 doctors on the trip, and they saved my life. But also, they took off my clothes in front of everybody and poured water on me and held me while I threw up. And then we went to the monastery in, sorry, my brain's going, went to another monastery. I was still not quite with it. So I was clothed again, taken to a monk's cell, and they kept working on me until I was okay. That was something. I wonder about Jacob and me. I really wanted, my ego was like, I want to show everybody how holy I am. Wow. I wouldn't have put it that way, but that's actually what it was. And Jacob's like, I don't know if he even thought. He just acted. I want, I'm going to get it. And my long-term limp is actually a very increased ability to have another heat stroke. So I have to be really, really careful. And but that's not really it so much as remembering that I laid it in the Monastery of the Transfiguration in Jericho, I just remembered, in a monk's cell having water poured all over me until they were sure I was okay, and throwing up all over these people. That'll show ya. However, me and Jacob, we came out of it different. He kept acting like Jacob, but in a sort of different, modified way. I kept acting like Connie, but boy, I tell you, my pride, my ego, they're not gone, of course, but they're in a different place by far. I also learned that God would save my life in the desert. I was in the desert. It was really hot. Have you been to the desert? Heat stroke is when you get too hot and your body can't handle the heat anymore, and your organs actually start to shut down, and you can die very easily with heat stroke. So you guys are fine because you're young and healthy, but you're also not in 120-degree heat very much, I don't think. But you don't have to think too much about it, but old ladies do, especially big old ladies. I know you're not. Isn't that great? Yay! I'm glad for you, honey. I really am. You're going to be a big old man. You're going to be a big old man, okay? But it's going to be a long time. Got a long time. So I tell you that to offer you my mortified thoughts a little bit about what I was trying to carry into a situation to show people how godly I was. Oh, you do learn after a while, just don't even think about that because it's going to backfire. And we don't need to, because if we are, it'll show. Have you not found that to be true? Even the shyest, quietest person, not up here talking and never will be, there's a transformation, and it feels like God. It feels like the Holy Spirit is extra present after a number of transformations that God is always working on with us. The long and the short of Jacob and me and you is God is working on transforming us. It never stops. The more we can open ourselves to it, the less dramatic it might have to be. And all of it is in the interest of bringing us closer to God's self. Not punishment, not mortification, but love. You got to get your edges shaved off a little in order to be drawn closer and closer to the heart of God. I wish you every kind of transformation that is not involving any medical crises, though often those do become moments of closeness to God. And I pray for all of us that we would continue that journey. And when we wrestle with all our heart. And when we come out of the wrestle, we remember, not with a limp maybe, but we remember we have met God and lived. We have met God and He has sanctified us. Amen.